Out in the North Sea, there's a story brewing. The journalist's female.
All those men.
Oh, don't you have men where you work?
Yes, of course we do. They're just not quite so earthy.
She's only looking for a sex scandal.
But somebody's going to get hurt.
Piper Alpha hurt?
Is this her?
Ah!
This will look very good.
Don't worry about that.
Roughnecks, Rough Ride, Thursday, 9:30 on BBC1.
What have you done?
A scuba diver drops the Environment Minister into deep water over sewage in the sea. Just one of the private investigations in half an hour. Now on BBC1 at 2.5 minutes past 7, the news with Martyn Lewis.
The Child Support Agency admits it's missed its financial target by more than £100 million. Hundreds more staff will be hired to deal with a huge backlog of work. The Rwandan capital Kigali falls to the rebels. And Ireland go down to Holland. They're out of the World Cup. Good evening. The Child Support Agency's first annual report reveals it's missed most of the performance targets it was set by the government. In the Commons, Labour said the agency was in administrative chaos, and ministers admitted it had a long way to go. A shake-up in the agency is expected later in the year.
Rebellious fathers' refusal to pay and their deliberate sabotage campaign was part of the reason for the agency's dismal record so far, the CSA's chief executive claimed today. It's fallen short of its financial target by at least £100 million, and even that's only an estimate.
I know that the Minister and
in the Commons, Labour's Social Security spokesman attacked the agency's performance while supporting its aims.
It is a system that needs friends. Disenchantment, disillusionment are growing. The Child Support Agency needs allies. It must have positive public confidence if it is to survive. And if we do not get action from the government to change the rules and the rigid framework within which it operates, then I fear that it will not survive.
The Social Security Secretary suggested more reform might be in the pipeline.
We are committed, as the Prime Minister himself promised, to make further changes if we're persuaded that they are necessary. And we will continue to improve the working of the system. Above all, we'll keep in mind the interests of both absent parents and lone mothers, of children and of taxpayers, but the children above all.
Yeah. The Commons Select Committee is likely to recommend radical reforms, including a limited appeals procedure and allowing mothers on benefit to keep some of their maintenance. The government may well agree. However, even that may not be enough to call off the revolt by the striking fathers. Polly Toynbee, BBC News, Westminster.
After 3 months of fierce fighting, the United Nations says the main government strongholds in the Rwandan capital Kigali have fallen to the rebel Rwanda Patriotic Front. Rebel forces are also reported to have captured the southern town of Butare. French troops stationed nearby have been ordered to resist any further advance westwards.
A few pockets of government resistance remain in Kigali and Butare to the south, but the rebels say they are in control. They stepped up their offensive late last week. Government troops are said to have fled from key positions last night. French soldiers in southwestern Rwanda say they'll stop the rebels if they push in their direction. The French say they made the threat because they want to set up a humanitarian enclave. But it confirms the worst fears of the rebels, who say they'll press on regardless. They believe the French intervened in Rwanda to save the Hutu-led government, which traditionally is a friend and military client of France. Newly recruited government troops in training in southwestern Rwanda think the same thing, and their morale has been much strengthened by the French intervention. Government militias are much more relaxed now as well, despite the rebel advance. These are the gangs who've been blamed for most of the genocidal killings of Tutsis. Without question, they believe the French are on their side in Rwanda to preserve at least part of their power. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Police in Cleveland are still questioning a man about the death of 3-year-old Rosie Palmer, who disappeared on Thursday. Her body was found in a flat near her home in Hartlepool last night. Rosie's mother has expressed anger at the way the police have handled the inquiry.
Cleveland police resumed a detailed search this afternoon of the area where Rosie Palmer went missing and was found dead. They'd sealed off the corner of Henrietta Street where she often played with some of the children who today placed flowers outside her home. It was barely 30 yards away, in a house just across the road, that police last night found a body, 4 days after their investigation began. House-to-house police inquiries had been aided by many local volunteers from this closely knit community. Beverly Palmer, appearing briefly outside her home, was angry about the way in which Cleveland police had responded to her daughter's disappearance.
They've not done their job, taking the money and there's doing nothing.
But today, the man leading the police inquiry confined himself to a very brief statement.
I do wish to express my sincere thanks to the media and members of the public for the exceptional assistance given to the police throughout the past few days in the search for Rosie.
What's compounded the sense of shock in the neighbourhood is that Rosie was found murdered so close to home, in an area where everyone thought children were safe. Mike Mackay, BBC News, Hartlepool.
Rewards totalling £25,000 have been offered for the safe return of Abby Humphreys, the baby abducted from a Nottingham hospital. Abby was just 4 hours old when a woman snatched her. Leaders of the main rail union, the RMT, have been meeting in London to decide their next move in the signal workers' pay dispute. The union has already called a fourth one-day strike for Wednesday. It could decide to extend the action to 2 or even 3 days a week. Well, joining me now from the RMT union's headquarters in London is our industry correspondent, Stephen Evans. Stephen, any sign of a decision yet?
Absolutely none, Martin. They've been meeting now for just short of 5 hours. What we do know, what is emerging, is that Wednesday's strike is well and truly on. There had been some suggestion that ACAS would stick its toe in the water again. That has evaporated now. The strike really is on. What they're discussing up there on the 5th floor is what to do really next week. Now, the possibility is that they escalate it from 1 a week to 2 a week and perhaps switch it to Friday. We don't know exactly what they're doing about that, but those are the possibilities they're looking at.
But does the fact that they've been talking so long mean that there is some disagreement about the future course they think the strike should take?
Not really, no. We had a strange week last week. It was the union's conference, and for that week alone, the union conference actually makes the decisions, not the executive, which is meeting up on the 5th floor. So they're basically bringing themselves up to speed. I imagine at the end of this, I still think actually they'll keep it to 1 day a week, though I'm not certain of that, and they may well switch it to the Friday. It doesn't mean disagreement at all. They're moving into subcommittees. They're talking an awful lot. We expect some kind of decision within the next hour, I hope, anyway.
Stephen, thanks very much. France has joined Germany in voicing concern over the safety of British beef. It's asked the European Commission to examine whether there should be a Europe-wide ban on imports of beef from British cows more than 3 years old. Last week, Germany proposed such a ban because of fears that BSE, or mad cow disease, could be transmitted to humans.
British beef sales to mainland Europe have been hit hard by months of bad publicity about the spread of BSE. Some beef imports from Britain are facing an imminent ban in Germany already. And France, too, is indicating now that it's unhappy with current measures to protect consumers. At the European Commission, officials received a letter from the French government 3 weeks ago, asking for further restrictions to be examined. But the note has just been made public. Conservative MEPs reacted angrily. One, a cattle breeder, accused France of hysteria and said every possible action was taken to make sure British beef sold abroad was BSE-free.
Just take the voice of the vets who are daily saying we are absolutely sure that British beef is safe to eat, and I would certainly have no objections to my children or my family eating beef from anywhere in Britain.
Cattle over 3 years old shouldn't be imported into mainland Europe from Britain, according to the French, one of the proposals being considered this week by EU scientists. The European Commission has been threatening legal action against any country which imposes an import ban unilaterally. But it accepts that such legal moves would become politically more difficult if France decided to stand firm with the Germans. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Brussels.
John Prescott has called on Labour to make a hard-headed commitment to reduce unemployment. In a policy statement to voters in the party's leadership elections, he said a future Labour government should set specific targets to return people to work. Our political correspondent John Sopel presents the last of 3 profiles of the candidates for the Labour leadership.
John Prescott has made the running in this leadership campaign in one respect at least, his commitment to ending unemployment. Today he called for the establishment of a commission for full employment, and he said a Labour government must set targets for reducing the jobless totals. Although that was something he refused to do himself, it would be for the commission to decide.
If the government can have targets for inflation, targets for interest rates and public borrowing, why can't it have targets for reducing unemployment and creating jobs for those who want to work? We must commit the whole nation to the cause of full employment. It is the key to so much more.
Mr Prescott is similarly committed to a minimum wage, but again without saying at what level it should be pegged. But one phrase has cropped up again and again that sums up his campaign, and that's traditional socialist values, but in a modern setting. And he revels in the role of working-class hero.
She told us she gave me free fish and chips last night. I know she did.
And he makes no apology for having a taste for the best things in life. His Jaguar and large country house are the butt of many Tory jokes. But the former liner steward turned Seamen's Union activist is not one who courts popularity. He infuriated Neil Kinnock 6 years ago by challenging for the deputy's job, promising to rebuild party membership. But thorn in the side though he might have been, he made life much more uncomfortable for the Tories. His withering attacks on transport policy made him indispensable on the front bench. And at last year's conference, the bad boy became saviour when John Smith put his head on the block over trade union reform.
He's put his head there. Now's our time to vote. Give us a bit of trust and let's have this vote support.
His loyalty then stood in marked contrast to Margaret Beckett, who was at best lukewarm about the reforms, and that's given him a tactical advantage now as they battle it out for the deputy's job. John Sopel, BBC News.
The row over changes to the health service continued today with a warning from the chairman of the British Medical Association that government reforms were failing and that non-emergency treatment had become a national lottery. Dr. Sandy Makara said the government should admit that the restructuring of the NHS had failed.
In his keynote speech to the conference, the BMA chairman said there was despair about the mood of alienation and demoralisation in the NHS.
There is an uncontrolled, ill-managed internal market, pitting purchaser against provider, hospital against hospital, and all to serve the perverse philosophy of winners and losers.
The Bishop of Birmingham has defended his sermon, saying he had a duty to talk about issues affecting the quality of life. It's more than 3 years since the government set up the internal NHS market, with hospitals competing for patient contracts. Ministers say the improvements in healthcare and efficiency are obvious.
When you talk to patients, universally they praise the care they've received. We have a health service available to all, doesn't depend on ability to pay, and that is something we're protecting.
Although ministers are keen to avoid more confrontation with health service staff, plans to introduce performance-related pay from next year make further conflict inevitable. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, Birmingham.
The Republic of Ireland are out of the World Cup. Jack Charlton's team lost 2-0 to Holland in the second round of the tournament at the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida.
The sapping heat and humidity in the Citrus Bowl was always likely to be more debilitating to the all-action Irish than the Dutch with their measured style. But for the first 10 minutes, Jack Charlton's side made light of it, and Steve Staunton could easily have had better luck from a deflection than he got. But the pace of the Dutch front three was posing an increasing threat, and when Overmars was allowed to escape on the right, the predatory Bergkamp exacted the expected punishment. The Irish response, typically robust but lacking real penetration, was, however, growing in conviction as the first half drew to a close. Cruel then that it should be punctured by one howling blunder. Jonk, the distinctly fortunate hero, Bonner, the devastated culprit. Pride and courage drove the Irish forward in the second half as they tried to make amends, but Houghton couldn't convert the one genuine chance they created. And in truth, they might easily have lost by 3, but for Roy's wasteful inaccuracy. The Irish odyssey was coming to an end. Without even a last hurrah, McGrath's effort was disallowed.
I can't ask more than the lads have given us. We've got a lot of good players. We've got a lot of some players that aren't as good. We know where we're a bit short, but every one of them work themselves into the ground, and I can ask for no more from them.
So Ireland are out, but memories of that famous win over Italy will linger long. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
Much of Ireland ground to a halt tonight. Such was the interest in the team's World Cup match. Most buses and trains are said to have stopped running as people gathered round their television screens. From Dublin, our Ireland correspondent Dennis Murray reports.
Mid-afternoon and Dublin's rush hour was well underway. The city, like the rest of the country, was shutting down. Ireland has found a pride in its soccer team that transcends all classes and creeds, and Big Jack is on the way to sainthood.
He's liked by all the people of Ireland. He's like a god, you know, and I think they have more respect for Jack than anyone else in Ireland, and I think he's doing very, very well.
Even those who were left behind by their fellas are right behind the team.
He went without me, yeah. We went with a whole lot of football team, you know, some Marine bar.
So where you be watching it tonight?
I'm heading off now to Magnum, where I always watch it.
Not long after kick-off, O'Connell Street was deserted. The bars, though, were full, both of people and high hopes. The Dutch played better, but win or lose, there'll still be a nationwide party in Ireland tonight, and a huge welcome for the homecoming team. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Dublin.
There'll be more news at 9. The 6 o'clock news will be back at its usual time tomorrow. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Let me show you this first of all. This is where we have some thunderstorms around at the moment. One or two, as you see, rumbling away close to parts of East Anglia, but just look at those vicious monsters across there on the continent, especially over Germany. And we can see the way they brewed up on a sequence of satellite pictures. Not much to them earlier on today. In fact, we had some thunderstorms across the southeast of England. Just look at the way that cloud grew and grew and grew and got bigger and bigger and darker and darker. And there has been some pretty vicious storms there actually this afternoon. Temperature dropping back from 34 degrees to 18 degrees. And some vicious gusts of wind as well. Still, that's miles away. What's happening in this country is that particular weather front's been moving across from the west, and it is introducing cooler and fresher weather. So we will see a drop in temperature. We've seen a drop of temperature during the course of today. We've also seen some outbreaks of rain, as indeed we still have across the more central and northern parts of the country. But a bright end to the day in southern areas, but all the while during the rest of the evening and through the night, we're going to find that rain working its way away northward, so that eventually it's just going to be stuck across the northeastern part of Scotland, although by the end of the night there will be one or two showers feeding into some of those western coasts. A much cooler and fresher night too than we've had for some time. There's tomorrow's chart. Low pressure to the west of us, little ridge across the south though, but even so I think there will be one or two showers even to begin with in the far southwest of the country. Still that rain in the northern part of Scotland. That's going to hang on throughout the day. Some pretty wet weather in places, especially in Shetland. We're also going to find cloud bubbling up in other parts as the day wears on, and one or two showers breaking out. I think in southern parts the showers should be fairly light and few and far between, but some heavier ones through northern parts of England, North Wales, and particularly across into Northern Ireland. Temperatures down tomorrow, cooler and fresher just about everywhere, but pleasant enough nevertheless, 19 to 22 degrees. And then the less settled theme actually continues for the following couple of days. Again, those temperatures are a little bit on the downside. Bright and sunny in most places to begin with, away from the northeast of Scotland, and then some heavy showers developing during the day.
In Look East tonight, 2 workers are burned as an explosion hits a factory in King's Lynn. And Hearts of Gold, the prisoners helping their special young friends. Good evening. 2 men are in hospital tonight after a chemical explosion at a factory in King's Lynn. They were showered with flames when a vat containing flammable liquid blew up. Managers at the factory say all safety procedures had been followed, but the fire service says it could have turned into a major incident.
This is the drum of chemicals that is thought to have caused today's explosion at the Industrial Foam Systems factory in King's Lynn. The blast ripped through the back wall of the building, tearing down an extension which used to stand level with the roof. 3 workers were injured in the accident, 2 of them seriously.
I think it could have been a lot worse. If some of the other tanks had ruptured, we would have had a major problem on our hands.
When you say major problem, can you explain what that would mean?
I would suggest you would need massive evacuation of this area.
There were 6 workers on the factory floor at the time of the explosion. 2 were pouring a chemical called isopentane into a vat. This highly flammable liquid is used to make industrial foam for fridges and cars. Today, in accordance with safety procedures, only one drum was in the building. The rest was stored outside.
We've got an excellent safety record. In fact, we've never had any sort of incident before today at all. That's in 12 years. Clearly, though, we shall be looking at the use of isopentane further for the future, and clearly we'll review the whole situation as and when we've got the full details.
One of the 2 men injured in the explosion has been transferred to the Special Burns Unit in the West Norwich Hospital. His condition tonight is said to be comfortable. The health and safety executives say they need to speak to him and his colleague before they can establish the cause of the explosion. Kristin Hadland, Look East, Kings Lynn.
A gang which slaughtered and butchered several lambs in a field at Stanion in Northamptonshire is being hunted by police. Detectives believe the gang may have used a rifle in the attack, which they describe as horrific.
Farmer Terry Baker discovered the slaughtered lambs and ewes when he went to check on his flock this morning. What he saw horrified him.
I first saw a ewe that had had its throat cut upside down just inside the gate on the left, and then I saw the heads of 8 lambs laying nearby and all their legs. But to see the damage that's left behind with the bones of these animals sticking through their shoulders is a bit distressing.
This sheep was so badly injured, its shoulder bones smashed, possibly by a bullet, that it had to be humanely killed in the field this afternoon. Several other sheep have also suffered injuries as a result of rough handling. In total, 3 ewes and 8 lambs are dead. Another 5 lambs are missing.
We'll be looking at people, possibly 4 people with vehicles, perhaps even 2 vehicles, in view of the fact they've chased or cornered the sheep in one section of the field to complete the task. I would certainly believe that we're looking for at least 4 individuals.
The killings happened overnight near the busy A43. Police also made another gruesome discovery at the scene, a bag containing a deer's head. Farmers in the region have been warned to be on their guard. Sally Chidzoy, Look East, Stanion in Northamptonshire.
A Norfolk computer consultant has become the first person in Britain to be jailed for distributing pornography on computer CD. Colin Jack, who lives at Staxford near Attleborough, was sentenced to 5 months in prison last April. Since then, he's been on bail pending an appeal.
Colin Jack had admitted 9 offences under the Obscene Publications Act. He had imported CD video discs from the USA, which contained explicit material. The firm also distributed other innocent material like computer games, and it was stressed that the pornographic images were only available through an 0891 telephone number and on proof of age. Mr. Jack himself had only scanned a little of the material, which he believed to be soft porn and within the law.
Defence barrister Karim Khalil said Colin Jack was a man not just of previous good character, but of impeccable character. He was, he said, a sound family man with high moral principles, who was quite shocked when he discovered the extent of the pornography that was available through his company.
The court heard that Colin Jack had cooperated fully with the police. His computer equipment was confiscated and is now being used in the police fight against crime in Norfolk. But in the end, it was not enough. The court decided unanimously to reject the appeal, and Mr. Jack will now serve the 5-month sentence originally imposed by Swaffham magistrates in April.
I think that given the circumstances of the case, the sentence sends a very clear message to would-be pornographers in the computer trade that their behaviour will not be tolerated.
After the hearing, there was no statement from Colin Jack's family or legal representatives. Cathy Lefebvre, Look East, Norwich Crown Court.
A lorry driver has been injured in an accident on the A45 at Saxham near Bury St Edmunds in Suffolk. A tractor and trailer which had been parked in a field rolled down an embankment into the path of a lorry. The lorry driver suffered cuts and bruises and had to be cut free from the cab by rescue workers. The road was completely blocked until the wreckage was cleared. In sport tonight, an international call-up for 2 3-day eventers from the region and success at Snetterton for a racing driver from Cambridge. With the details, Mike Liggins.
Thanks, Stuart. Simon Harrison has been getting some rest today after finishing second in the Wilhar 24-hour race at Snetterton. The 24-year-old Cambridge driver didn't get much sleep over the weekend. Simon Harrison spent most of Saturday night driving and most of Sunday night celebrating. He did 6 1.5-hour stints in his number 32 Honda Civic, and with teammates Dan Liddell and Stephen Warburton, Harrison finished first in his class and second overall. The Will High is a gruelling event, and both the cars and the drivers suffer. Harrison says the excitement kept him going through the night, but by Sunday morning the young racing school instructor felt dreadful. Despite that, Harrison survived to retain his lead in the National Saloon Car Cup. The race was won by Del Delaronde, Nicky Torreggiani and Bob Pope in a Ford Escort Cosworth. The Bedford Athletics Stadium hosted the 3A's Under-20 Championships at the weekend, which were also the trials for the World Junior Championships in Lisbon in 2 weeks' time. Nick Budden, who runs for the Norfolk Olympiads, finished second in the final of the 400 metres behind Mark Hilton. Budden is unlikely to be picked in the individual 400, but he may be chosen to run in the 4x400 relay in Portugal. In other results, Peterborough's Stephen Boddy was 8th in the 5,000 metres, while Robert Thickpenny, also from Peterborough, was 6th in the pole vault. Newmarket's Charlotte Bathe has been selected in the British 3-day event team for the World Equestrian Games in The Hague later this month. Caroline Sizer from Norfolk is also in the team. Riding Cool Customer, Charlotte Bathe was in action at the Altrip Horse Trials in Northamptonshire yesterday. She's delighted to be selected for the British team, as is Caroline Sizer, who was also in action at Altrip. Caroline finished 13th on her horse, Ghost Town. That doesn't sound too good, but like Charlotte Bathe, Caroline was taking it easy yesterday. It was another very successful weekend for Altrip and Earl Spencer. The sun shone, the band played, and Laurel and Hardy even managed to stay out of trouble. The Sports Council had hundreds of calls last week in response to our series on health and fitness. So thanks if you took the trouble, and good luck if you're just about to embark on a fitness programme, Stuart.
And you're still going to the gym every day, of course.
Absolutely.
Now, anyone who's ever raised money for charity will know just how hard it is. So £16,000 in 2 years is a fantastic achievement by any standards. But for staff and inmates at Blunderston Prison in Suffolk, it also marks their deep commitment to a very special local school.
For Sarah, Monday morning was greeted with great joy and excitement. Parked outside Warren Special School, a brand new minibus about to leave for its first trip, taking her and 6 of the older pupils for physiotherapy and movement classes. What makes this journey so special is that the sessions are with prisoners who helped pay for the bus. Blunderston inmates and staff were sponsored in half marathons, 10-pin bowling and bike rides. £16,000 in all.
Originally, the prison had to provide a bus, and this caused quite a lot of logistic problems from the prison point of view. It's meant that we are able to bring all the children in one bus and bring them right round to the door, and the lads can come out and collect the children. It's just wonderful.
Were you surprised at how quickly the money was raised?
Oh, yes, indeed. When it was first mooted, we sort of nodded our heads wise. He said, yes, yes, fine, expecting sort of in about 5 years' time a bus to be delivered. And they've done it so quickly, it's just been absolutely marvellous, and the amount of effort that's gone into it, and it's just wonderful.
This project began 3 years ago when the physical demands of older pupils were taxing the school's mainly female staff. Enter Blunderston with a captive selection of male strength. Inmates are carefully selected and trained. It's proved a richly rewarding relationship.
Be a superstar.
It makes you feel like a useful human being, basically. The children need someone there that they can rely on, and someone that knows what they're doing, and someone they know that isn't going to hurt them in any way. I'll get a buzz out of it.
I thoroughly enjoy being with the kids, get a lot of pleasure out of it. Sort of substitute for my own children, really, but yeah, it's lovely, it's good fun. Most rewarding thing I've done, I think.
Thanks a lot, that was lovely. Bye-bye. Look.
Great story, isn't it? Let's hope it's a good story with the weather. Ivor Moores.
Thank you, Stuart. Not bad, actually. 1 or 2 showers lingering at the moment, but they'll quickly move away northwards. And then for the night, well, it's a dry, clear picture. The wind's tending to go southwesterly, and those southwesterly winds are going to bring less humid air across the region during the course of the night. Lowest temperatures between 12 and 13 degrees. Tomorrow morning, also dry and bright. The best of the sunshine first thing. Those southwesterly winds picking up to a good moderate breeze. We will see cloud building up, though, as we go through the morning. So enough cloud around in the afternoon, I think, to give the odd shower here and there,
although I think many places will manage to stay dry. Even with that, there'll be some sunny intervals, and that's going to help the temperatures up to a high of something like 21 or 22 degrees, although those southwesterly winds are going to make it feel much, much fresher than it has done for the last 2 or 3 days. I think that's really the big change in the weather tomorrow, a less humid feel. So as far as tonight's concerned, well, we've got a dry night with clear spells, becoming less humid all the time. Tomorrow, dry and bright in the morning, showers in the afternoon.
Ivor, thank you very much indeed. That's it. We're back at our usual time tomorrow night from all of us here. Good night.
BBC2 has just started a new series exploring the craft in housing around the world, wall to wall.
For every murder, the bereaved. For every abuse, the child. For every crime, the victim. Nick Ross presents BBC1's Crime Limited, Tuesdays. At last, the victim's perspective.
BBC1 now enlists the services of more members of the public, armed with camcorders, making their private investigations.